This is Jewish Spotlight, a weekly television program presented by Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island, featuring various aspects of modern Jewish life and Jewish culture. Now, here is your host, Rabbi Tuvia Teldin.
Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish Spotlight. You know, a lot of times people come to me and they say, Rabbi, I tell you what, I like being Jewish, but I really feel uncomfortable about coming into the synagogue. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. I don't know when to do it. And you know what? I'm very well aware that that is a problem. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, many people didn't get an education as a child or as an adult even as to what synagogue skills are. And tonight, we're going to learn about it. So I want you to sit back and just enjoy yourself. Maybe take a little piece of paper and pen if you want, take some notes. Because we have with us somebody today who has made a tremendous effort and with a high-quality program of introducing so much information and so many resources just for you. For those people out there who are interested in finding out about what do you do when you walk into a shul. A shul in the Yiddish language, means a synagogue. And in addition, I want to dedicate tonight's show to Don Lewis. Don was the director of this show for 2 years. And he was a very special person who did a lot for this show. And in addition, he had always asked me, over the course of those 2 years when he was director, to do a show like this. So I want to dedicate the show in his memory. Unfortunately, Don passed away in a tragic accident, and we miss him dearly. And we'll hopefully live up to his expectations tonight with this show. So we have with us today Rabbi Zalman Goldstein, who is a teacher, an author, a publisher. And Rabbi Goldstein, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Okay. Now, Rabbi Goldstein, we have a challenge for you. We have somebody who's walking into a synagogue and who is totally lost. They don't know why they're there. Either they were, as we say, schlepped there by their spouse or maybe their kids or by their guilt conscious or whatever it might be. And they have to come in order to be able to be familiar with using the shul, the synagogue resources. What do we do and what would you advise such a person?
I think the first thing would be is to recognize that we walked into a house where there's lots of Jewish people who are worshiping, to recognize that this is a holy place and that it's a place where people are not only just there for social purposes like for a luncheon or for some other various sport events or to catch up on social needs, but more also to communicate their needs between themselves and their maker. And so I would say the first thing we need to do is realize that we're stepping over the threshold of the synagogue. We are walking into a new domain. It's no more the street. Now it's just private time between me and God.
Okay. And that's a very good point, because I think it's important for people to be able to push that button when they do walk in. Too often people bring everything from the street into their synagogue, whether it be discussing business or how you've been or what's going on, and not necessarily feeling the potential, developing the potential that lies there in the synagogue experience.
Exactly.
So how do you develop that synagogue experience? How do all these quote-unquote paraphernalia of Judaism that you find in the synagogue help us to be able to advance that purpose of connecting to our Creator?
Well, it's a great word you use, paraphernalia, because in the synagogue you would find many different products, or I should say artifacts, that enable the person when he comes into the synagogue to actually feel those feelings.
All right.
As you would notice when you come into the synagogue, you would generally find that there is a section where there is talesim, which is the prayer shawls, which we'll be showing a little bit later on the show.
Right, we have one right here.
And that's correct. And we also have in the synagogue itself a rack of books. And a lot of people say this is not where you're going to find Rad McNally's Road Atlas. It's something where you would find a road atlas for the shul, a siddur, a prayer book, which we'll be discussing as well a little bit later on in the show.
Fine.
You would also see groups of people sitting together. A lot of people say, isn't prayer a private thing? Why don't we do it in such a public forum? Prayer should be something done at home. But in reality, when you walk into a shul and you see lots of people sitting there, moved and perhaps even enwrapped in their prayers, one begins to feel the feelings of prayer emerge within himself, so he wants to participate with the shul.
In fact, that's one of the reasons I believe why in most Orthodox synagogues, of course, you have separate seating of the men in one section and women in another section. So there shouldn't be there for the purpose of socialization, but more there to have a vertical experience, to really focus on the spiritual matters instead of those normal social matters that we have during the week as well.
Exactly, which brings us back to the very first point, is that when we cross the threshold into the synagogue, we're not crossing into a health club, but into God's domain.
Okay.
And so this enables and brings across those feelings. There's a few other items in the synagogue that we really need to become aware of. Realize, why are they there? How did they get there? Was there Mark Chagall in the times of the temple that actually said, let's put this here and this here? Obviously, there's a purpose for them. As a matter of fact, I have a few books which I brought here this evening
Please.
to show us different artifacts from within the synagogue itself.
Okay.
First,
That's it.
Here
Can you
is
get
a-
us out of that?
here is a synagogue which is somewhere in America in the early days. As you see, there's an American
This is,
flag
in
there.
fact, the Turok Synagogue, which I believe is the oldest synagogue in America.
That's very possibly so. This synagogue demonstrates one of the actual interiors of what a general synagogue will look like. The main focus being the
Yeah.
Ark, which is the Aron Kodesh,
Okay.
which will lead us to our second picture here, which I brought with me tonight.
Okay, great.
And that's a picture of the Torahs, which is in the Ark. Now, I begin with the Ark because this is something of fundamental centrality to the synagogue. The Torah contains our entire heritage written between the two poles of its parchment.
Right. Now, let me just point out in this picture itself, this is what's called the paroches. The paroches is the curtain that's on the outside of the ark itself. This is the Torah scroll itself. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 Torah scrolls, which of course have within them the whole of the 5 books of Moses. You have here breastplates on each of the Torah scrolls, and this is called the Yad, which we'll be showing you soon as well, and a Keser, which is the part of the Torah that has a beautiful crown over it, very often a silver crown, which we also have here with us today to show you. And that, of course, is on the western wall. I'm sorry,
On
the
the
eastern wall.
The eastern wall,
Right.
that's correct. Unless you're on the other side of the North Pole, it would be in the
Right.
western wall.
Okay.
But the purpose of the Torah being so central to the synagogue infrastructure is really because it embodies everything we believe and everything we practice. It's appropriate, for example, if let's say you're in a tennis tournament hall where they have different paraphernalia, they have tennis rackets, they have tennis balls of various strength and tensiles. In a synagogue, you want to, of course, have what's most important to the religion, and that is the Torah. So once again, the first main center that you would see when you come into the synagogue would be the Ark, where you house the Torah scrolls. Pulling back from there, to borrow studio terms,
Okay.
you pull back from the Aron Kodesh, you would see, which is the Holy Ark, you would generally see a reading table, because it leads to understand that if there is a Torah, it's not just going to sit there as nice decoration. It's actually going to be taken out from the Ark and read on this reading table. So as you look over the synagogue and overcome the first jitters you have of being in the synagogue, perhaps for your first time, take a few moments, I would say, for the person to look around and become familiar with these various artifacts which are inside the synagogue. One of the central parts is the reading table called Bima in Hebrew. And that reading table is where the reading of the Torah takes place. It's a communal event. This is done during the prayers at a specific interval. And it's also one of the highlights of the service because we meld both prayer and learning at the same time.
Okay.
It is not just a prayer experience, but we get to hear what does the Torah demand of us so that when we leave the synagogue, we leave with a deeper understanding to our religion, a deeper understanding of what it's all about.
And a greater knowledge of what God wants from us.
Absolutely.
Okay, what I would like to do now is I want to show a little clip that you brought along with you of what an actual synagogue is like. Now, we're going to show the synagogue, which is 770 Eastern Parkway, which is Lubavitch headquarters. Now, Lubavitch headquarters is not necessarily your typical synagogue, as you will see very soon, because there are no pews and no aisles, and it is very, very crowded, and it's a situation which requires a certain amount of strength to be able to even survive. So let's take a look at this, and I'm going to talk as we see the pictures, so I'll explain as we go along exactly what's going on that you're looking at on the screen. This is the Lubavitcher Rebbe going up to his, what we call the Stender, and he's on the eastern wall, and to the left you see the Aron Kodesh with the Parochas. Parochas, of course, is the curtain that's covering the Ark. Now the Rabbi, the Rebbe, who is the spiritual guide and leader, mentor for Lubavitch Worldwide, is now stepping back in order to be able to begin his afternoon prayer. And he's starting the prayer. He's, of course, leading the service. Not that he's the cantor. There's another person who is the cantor. And you see now the crowd of people who is filling the whole congregation. There are thousands of people who fit into this room in order to be able to partake in the services. Rabbi Goldstein, you have anything to say?
An interesting note. Notice that none of these people are wearing talesim per se, which is the
Right.
prayer shawl.
Right.
And how come that is so?
Okay.
Now,
How come?
of course, one of the first things we need to remember.
But now we do have the prayer shawls.
There you go.
Right.
That
This
must
is
be
a
a
separate
morning
service.
shot.
Right. This is the morning shot. This is during Shachrit, which is the morning service. Now, you notice also that the Rebbe was wearing the boxes on the top of his head, which is what?
The phylacteries. They're called
Okay.
tefillin. They're with
Okay.
us actually from Mosaic times, from the times when Moses brought us the Torah on the Mount Sinai.
Right.
And they're worn every single morning by male adults over the age of 13.
Okay.
And it's not worn
Right.
on Shabbat, though, I must point
Right,
out. Shabbat
right,
or festivals.
exactly. Okay. Now, the talis, of course, which we have over here, do you want to explain the origin of the talis? Because when a person walks in, let's say for a man and a woman would both have in common to take the siddur.
That's correct.
But a man also would take a yarmulke, the kippah, to cover his head, to show his awe for God and the sense of a presence beyond him. And maybe you can give us a little bit of an explanation of what a talis is that a man would also take in order to be able to wear during the prayer services on Shabbos or during the week.
Sure. The most distinctive thing you would find about the talis is its uniform design. Probably all talisim that have been manufactured, you would notice that there is this zebra-looking like design on the talis. And the question is this something that we have to really understand? Why is there this design? I mean, what is the
Okay.
purpose of such a design? Another thing that you would notice on the talis is
Wait
it
a
has...
second. Are you going to give us an answer to that?
Of course, of
Okay.
course. Yeah.
Keep us in suspense.
Another thing that we have to understand is why are there fringes on the talis?
Okay.
Especially since they could prove very inconvenient when you're turning around corners and they get caught in the bench,
Which often happens to
which
me.
often happens many times. The question is really, what is the purpose of these two particular qualities to the talis, which
Okay.
of course there are many others, which if we have time I'll demonstrate for you a little later.
Okay.
Okay, the first one, the uniformity of the talis. This is very important, since when you come into a synagogue, you would find that most of the people who are sitting and praying are actually looking either in the prayer book or at their neighboring friends who are sitting next to them in prayer. Some of them are wearing fancy suits. Others are wearing not so fancy suits. There are doctors, there are lawyers, and then you have your plumbers and your photographers or various levels of people within your society.
Right.
The purpose of the talis uniform, the fact that it's a uniform look and design, is that when we put it on in the synagogue, we actually evaporate and destroy any of the
That's an
social
interesting
barriers
explanation. I never heard that.
that would be
Okay.
within the different groupings. So that
I like that.
you actually feel that you're part of one voice that
Right.
prays out, rather than,
Right.
oh, I'm a little bit, my suit's like this, or my coat is like that. And like this, you really feel part, and you sort of like meld into one whole
Okay.
with the community.
Fine.
Another interesting fact,
In fact,
which
if I
was...
can just add on to that, of course,
Sure.
also, our prayers itself in the prayer book are said in the plural we. In other words, we pray to God as a congregation, not necessarily just as an individual. Number one, because our prayers as a community are much stronger if we come as a group before God in order to supplicate and ask or to praise or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
And also, it's a uniting force.
Absolutely. And what's interesting to note is also in the prayers, we would find prayers when people are not well, prayer for wealth, prayer for health. What happens if a guy has everything he needs, or a person has health and he's really healthy?
Right.
Yet we say, make us healthy, even if I am not healthy, but the person next to me, it's important we pray for them as well.
Right. Because we feel they're lacking as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, now please explain these tzitzis.
Yeah, these are called fringes. These fringes are also hark back to the times of Mosaic law, which brings us to the Mount Sinai almost 2,500 years ago. And the tzitzis was actually prescribed to us in the Torah, in a portion which we read when we hold the tzitzit in the synagogue. And the purpose of the tzitzit is really, harks back to the law that says when you have a four-cornered garment, to actually affix fringes to them.
Okay.
So since today we really don't wear four-cornered garments, we have more of our two-cut garments or the different shirts or jackets that we wear, how can we fulfill this principle? It makes for a very difficult precept and mitzvah to fulfill. And we love doing mitzvahs. So what we do is we actually create a four-cornered garment, which hence is the talis, because we want to have as many mitzvahs as we can in the synagogue. And we put on the fringes onto it so that we could, A, have the mitzvah of the fringes on the talit, and B, be reminded of the message of the fringes. What is the message of the fringes? That is that when we see them, we should remember the mitzvahs of the Torah, all the commandments, and also not to go astray from this that we were commanded to do as Jewish people, and that is to actually be examples of how humanity is supposed to lead their lives. I would like to also point out one more interesting thing to you, Rabbi, about the tzitzis, and that is that there are 5 knots, if you would notice here.
Right.
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Within these knots, there is also deep mystical connotations. Again, it's not some modern weave or something of a passing fad. Each of these tzitzis combined together, if you were to take the 5 knots, this 8 strings per side, together with the word tzitzis, which is the Hebrew tzadik, yud, tzadik, taf, combines to make the numeric value of 613, which is the total amount of mitzvahs that one has within the Torah.
So every time we use the mitzvahs, we're really reminding ourselves of all of the 613 mitzvahs.
Exactly. And so, as we're back to what we were saying before, if the tzitzit gets caught in a chair, you actually need to replace not the chair but the tzitzis, because you've actually diminished from the total count of 613.
Now, would you like to show everybody how a talis is put on? You would like me to do that?
I'd like you to do that.
I was afraid you were going to say that. Okay, so just for all of you people out there who have a little problem knowing what to do, here we are. We're going to put on the tzitzis. I'm going to stand up now. And as you can see over here, let me just show this to you. Many of the talisim that you might see have the blessing on the tzitzis, on the talis. Right over here in the middle, we see the blessing. Can you get a shot of that? Okay, you have that? All right, so you'll see the blessing itself. Where we have that? Okay, right. And you can see how it's written in Hebrew. Now what you'll do is you can take that, and for those who know basic Hebrew will read it. It says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivonu lisatef b'tzitzis. Now lisatef b'tzitzis means to wrap ourselves in the tzitzis. So what you do is take it like this, go over your shoulder, over your head like this, and put it over like this. That's it. And then keep it so that one tzitzit will be in the front, one will be in the back, like this. Now these are smaller talesim that are worn by many of the people in my congregation. The Lubavitch talis, which you might have seen in the video that we just showed, really goes from head just about below your knees, almost to your toe.
The shorter talesim came about in the Depression era when they ran out of material. But today there's abundance of material.
Yeah, there's no problem. And the big talesim are very nice because if you really want to, you wear the large talis and you can really wrap yourself in the talis and really feel a certain type of kedusha, holiness, and like you're enwrapped in God's presence. Okay, let's go on now. I want to continue with this and go into some other things. Okay, we have now, let's say, the Torah reading. That's another time where, of course, it's a very special time of the service. It's after we've finished the whole beginning of the service. We get to the Torah, and we take the Torah out of the ark, and at that time, we're going to remove the different parts of the Torah itself. What happens then? Can you explain what this is, for instance?
Sure. I would like to get back after that to discuss before the Torah, because there's so much going on within the prayers that take place from when we walk into the synagogue.
All right.
But I'll go ahead and explain what the Torah is. When the Torah would come back from the ark, which is brought out generally by someone who is honored within the congregation with this honor. Some people will pay big sums of money to have this honor in order so that they can go up to the Torah and bring it out from the ark and be the representative of the community as he hugs the Torah and brings it down forward through the procession up to the reading table. But generally, the way it works today is that you would have somebody who would go up, bring the Torah from the ark, give it to the reader who is leading the services, the one person called the chazan, the cantor, or the leader as it's called. He would bring the Torah up in turn to the reading table. It would then be passed on to the gabbai, who is usually like the beadle or the one who officiates.
There's so many names. With a D, not a T.
And his name is not McCarthy or it's not the Beatles, but it is just somebody who's
McCarthy,
like that's it. The officiator, administrator of the synagogue. He would take the Torah, put it down on the bimah, which is the reading table.
Okay.
And then the cloak, that beautiful, beautiful cloak that's on top of the Torah, is removed and put along on the side of the bimah at some location. Some people even have a special shelf-like item that they put it on.
All right.
Okay, now that once the cover is removed, certain prayers are said, basically reminding us that we are reading the same Torah that was given to us on Mount Sinai, and we should stick to its words and adhere to all its commandments, then somebody is called up from the community. You would think really a rabbi should be called up to have the honor of making the blessing on the Torah, but no, Judaism doesn't have the levels where you have clergy and then you have the laity and you have the regular people who pray and those common folk. In Judaism, there's no such barriers. Really, the rabbi and the layman are both obligated, and proudly so, to the same level of commandments, to the same level of adherence. And so this point is brought out when we choose someone from the community who is not necessarily the learned sage of the town to come up to make the blessing over the Torah. This is repeated 7 times. Many reasons were given for this, but in short, one of them was the 7 days of the week. Today is Shabbat, the 7th day, so we honor the 7th day for this. There are various other, perhaps there shouldn't be quarrels, he got it and he didn't get it, so 7 seems to be a safe number.
The Torah is not just read on the Shabbos. It's also read, of course, Monday, Thursday, anytime we have the new moon, which is Rosh Chodesh. Of course, the lunar calendar is what the Jewish calendar follows.
And on fast days.
On fast days and other special days.
Right. Shabbat, however, if I may point out, and Yom Kippur are the only times where the Torah is read more than 3, with 3 people called up to the Torah. There may be one other holiday which escapes me presently, but there's generally have 7 people on Shabbat, with the last one being the maftir, which we will discuss in a moment. So now this person is called up to the Torah. Now, usually he is prepped before. I mean, we have with us here on the table, if you could be so kind to hand it over to me, is a little card which ironically shows about the success of commercialism in America. It's made in Taiwan, actually. I don't know if they read Hebrew there, but this card over here shows the blessings with English transliteration. And this is a big time saver and perhaps sweat saver for those in the synagogue having a reading call to the Torah for the very first time.
Which many synagogues have right on top of the bima. So just in case a person is called up, they shouldn't be nervous, and the fact that it's maybe the first time that they're called up, but they're not familiar with the blessing.
The blessings are right here in English.
All synagogues will help you as far as how to read the blessing.
Once you are called up to the Torah, you will be asked to give your father's name, your name, and your father's name.
Hebrew name.
Hebrew name, that's correct. So it's always good to brush up on your Hebrew name if you don't know it now. I would always recommend people to find out what their Hebrew name, what their father's Hebrew name is, so they're ready when the question is popped in the synagogue. It's not as spontaneous. Usually you would know before you were called up, but sometimes if you're a new face in the synagogue, they're especially prone to give you the aliyah because sort of to indoctrinate.
To get you into the swing of things.
That's correct. So you come up to the Torah, you're given the gartel, which is the band that ties and holds the Torah closed, which was removed previously after the mantle was removed. And you actually go over to the Torah and you stand to the left side of the right side of the reader. In the olden days, actually, an interesting point is that every person who was called up to the Torah was reading the Torah. So you had 7 people.
Because they were all knowledgeable and able to do so.
That's right. You didn't have the 3 tenors, you had the 7 tenors. Everyone read the Torah in their own kind of manner and mode. Today, however, since most people do not know, are not proficient in reading the Torah with its cantillations, there are no vowels in the Torah. It's extremely difficult. There are no commas, periods, punctuation marks, question marks. Which
so you really have to memorize it very well.
You got to memorize a lot. And so over the years, it moved over to having one designated reader who would read for you, but you would still be there at the Torah and make the blessing over the Torah. So you make the blessing of the Nosein HaTorah, which we have written down over here. If you want, we could share it with the audience. On the other hand, you would have many things which take place on the Torah scroll. And you would make the blessing, and then the Torah is read. The rabbi opens up the Torah and begins reading, and it concludes it.
We have this. Maybe you want to show our audience what these are?
Sure. This is a yad. A yad is something which is used to point to the letters of the Torah. The Torah in itself, like I said, has many lines of text, one layered on top of the other as a column. And so the reader uses this to actually point. Since his finger may even be too big to cover up certain letters, he uses this to point along and to help the one who is being called up to the Torah actually follow the text. So if he cannot really read it, at least visually he could scan it, because there is holiness to the letters, and when we visually scan the letters, they do affect our soul.
All
And
right.
so that's what this yacht
Now,
is for.
Rabbi Goldstein, I know there are a lot of different topics that we could go into, and there's no
Oh, yeah.
shortage of
Oh,
different
yeah.
things we could discuss here, and a lot of questions that perhaps our audience has. But I know you have some very interesting publications also that you worked
Sure.
on, in addition to, of course, the beautiful art pieces that we have up on the walls, and I know have been looked at by our audience. But can you show us a little bit about this,
Sure.
and in a minute just tell us exactly what this little book is all about?
Sure, I've worked very hard to create a grouping of products which will help the uninitiated in the community to learn exactly what Judaism has to offer and how to go about different things. This book is one example of this. It's called the Complete Shabbat Synagogue Companion. And what it does is it walks you through the prayer book as you come into the synagogue. It tells you
Okay.
when to stand, when to sit, what the prayers mean. So if you have an English translated Siddur, you could actually use this as a little guide,
Okay.
like a little
All right.
genie on your shoulder that tells you what to do,
All right.
how to do it.
Do we believe in genies also?
I don't think so presently.
Okay. Can you tell us your phone number then? Also, I
Sure.
understand you have a website. Maybe you can give
Yes,
us that. as
all of our products actually are available on our website, and that's at www.jewishlearninggroup.com.
Okay.
And the phone number, if those who are not yet on the web,
Yes.
would be 1-888-56-LEARN.
Okay, great.
That's 565-3276, and we'll be happy to make these available to anyone who calls in.
Okay, very good, very good. All right. Now, what else do we have to do? I want you to show us this. We just have a short amount of time. Please just show us this quickly, 30 seconds, and then we're going to get the ball rolling.
Sure, this is called a crown.
Okay.
Now, this is not from Prince Charles or from any other coronation
Okay.
event. This is a crown of the Torah.
All
It's
right.
a real ornate piece of material, and if you notice the decorations,
Yes, it's beautiful.
it shows our
Stunning.
the effort that's put in, and it's something that's really befitting a king, and that's how we feel about Torah and
Okay.
about God.
Very
So
good. Okay,
we
I'm
have
glad you
this
brought
in
that
the
along,
synagogue.
and I appreciate it because, of course, it is beautiful. And I appreciate you coming out, and I hope
My
you'll be
pleasure.
very successful in spreading this knowledge because it is so necessary. And there are so many people who I think would like to go to synagogue, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, feel that hesitancy. So I'm going to put out a challenge to everybody out there. If you don't feel comfortable in the synagogue, try something. There are ways of getting that information out to you. Call up Rabbi Goldstein. You can speak to him personally also. He'll be happy to call you back, I'm sure, if any specific questions you have, or to get his books or videos or any other of the information that he has, or just look up on his website, because we need knowledge. You know, Moses said, let my people go. Today we have to say, let my people know. It's important to know what it means to be Jewish. So in the meantime, I want to wish every single one of you a healthy and a happy week, day, year, and keep that Jewish knowledge going. Do whatever you can to do a mitzvah, to make your life better, your community better, and to make sure that you do whatever you can to increase in the performance of mitzvahs. Because they're so easy to do. They're so easy to perform. It just takes a little bit of an effort. Right?
That's correct.
Okay, so
And
let's
thank
keep
you for having me.
It's my pleasure, and we're going to do a second show with you also, just to go a little bit more into what this is, because there's so much to learn. Please stay tuned. Next week, we're going to show you about the Shabbos. Good night. Shalom.
Simcha,